The airport loudspeaker echoed between the gleaming glass walls, and in that instant, a cold sentence sliced through the air like a knife. "Sorry, this line is for first class only. Economy passengers, please move over there." The line of travelers faltered. A few curious glances turned. Naomi Carter stood there, the ticket trembling slightly in her hand, beneath the sunlight streaming through the glass roof. At 50, she carried the calm authority of someone who had weathered hundreds of corporate battles. Her salt and pepper hair was tied neatly back. A grey suit hugged her tall frame. A slim watch on her wrist kept a steady rhythm. But what made people pause was not her appearance. It was the certainty in her presence, the kind that made space shrink around her. Yet to Brooke Lawson, the chief flight attendant with her blonde hair wound into a perfect bun, Naomi was nothing more than someone who did not belong here. Brooke did not bother to glance at the ticket. Her eyes skimmed over Naomi's skin, her modest attire, and her words fell like a sentence, a warning cloaked as a smile. Naomi lifted her head. She did not rush to argue. Her grey eyes caught the airport lights, reflecting both sorrow and a quiet flame. She knew this look too well, at Yale, when they said she was only a diversity scholarship, in boardrooms when she was dismissed as a quota hire, at banks when her flawless investment proposals were rejected. And now, at the boarding gate of Aurora Air, the very airline begging for her capital, the past replayed itself. "This is my seat." Naomi raised the boarding pass to Brooke's eye level. Her voice was soft, yet it rang with unshakable force. Brooke did not touch the ticket. Arms folded, her voice was cold. "We've seen many passengers try to sneak into first class. Please move to the other line. Don't make this difficult." A murmur rose in the queue. The white man ahead of Naomi had just been waved through without showing anything, and now turned back awkwardly. A mother with a child frowned. A young man discreetly lifted his phone to record. The air thickened, like fog before a storm. Naomi pressed her lips together. She held out the ticket again, this time right in front of Brooke's face. Seat 2A. Purchased weeks ago. For a split second, Brooke's mask slipped. She snatched the ticket, reading the name printed in bold, Naomi Carter, First Class 2A. Her moment of hesitation vanished quickly, replaced by a sharper smirk. "This seat has been reassigned to another customer. You'll be moved to economy. Don't worry, we'll give you a voucher." A gasp rippled down the line. Some faces burned with anger, whispers of unbelievable rising. But Brooke's eyes flicked toward a white man in a suit, still on his phone. The message was clear. The seat was his, not the black woman standing before her. A pang hit Naomi's chest, not from losing a seat, but from remembering her mother's voice. "They will try to erase you. Never let them succeed." In the heavy silence, Naomi slipped her phone from her leather bag. Calm fingers tapped into a secure app. "Marcus, freeze the wire." Just 4 words, but it was an earthquake. $500 million, the first installment of a $2 billion deal with Aurora Air, was frozen with a single swipe. Brooke had no idea. She still wrapped herself in the false authority of a front-line uniform. "Cooperation will be appreciated." Naomi's gaze cut straight into hers, voice steady and sharp. "So is respect." That single line sliced through the air like a blade. Phones shook as they recorded every word, every glance. Airport security approached, ready to escort the woman out of the first-class lane. Naomi did not resist. She simply adjusted her lapel and walked tall, each step pressing down on the fate of Aurora Air. Because what they did not know was that the woman they humiliated today held the very life of the airline in her hands. And the moment the glass doors closed behind her, the current shifted. It would not just sweep away one flight attendant, but an entire empire. The murmur in the lounge swelled like a hive struck by a stick. Arms shot up, phone screens glowed, and short clips were uploaded to social media at lightning speed. Less than 10 minutes after Naomi Carter was escorted away from the gate, the first hashtags had already begun to trend. At her black CE removed, not first class, while black. Sitting in the VIP lounge, Naomi placed her leather bag beside her, her eyes fixed on the window where an Aurora Air jet prepared for takeoff. In her hand, the boarding pass still held its crease, a scrap of paper that seemed meaningless but had just become historical evidence. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications from her assistant, COO Marcus Lee, and the head of communications. One message lit up. The clip has over 10,000 shares in 15 minutes. Do we need to respond now? Naomi's lips curved slightly. She typed slowly. Not yet. Let the truth speak. On the other side of the gate, Brooke Lawson moved about casually, handing out water as if nothing had happened. A thin smile stretched across her lips, but a few glances around her had shifted. The mother with a child shook her head in disapproval. The young man who had filmed earlier now streamed live on Facebook. Look at this. A black woman kicked out of the first-class seat she bought. This is 2025. Inside the cabin, Peter Whitfield, the white man granted seat 2A, leaned back with his champagne. He felt a prick of discomfort as a few passengers stared, some whispering behind their hands. He forced a calm facade, but unease gnawed at him. The seat that once felt like privilege now sat heavy as a throne of shame. In New York, inside the glass offices of Grant Capital Partners, Marcus Lee had just received the freeze the wire order. His screen displayed the halted transaction, $500 million. His brow furrowed, but the corners of his mouth curved into a cold smile. He understood. Naomi had just turned a personal humiliation into a financial weapon of destruction. Online, the 30-second clip spread everywhere. Naomi standing calmly, boarding pass in hand, and the cutting words, "So is respect." The caption quickly became a meme, a slogan. On LinkedIn, professionals debated, if Aurora Air can treat a first-class passenger this way, how do they treat regular ones? Meanwhile, Aurora Air's communications team in Los Angeles scrambled. Phones rang non-stop, inboxes overflowed. Requesting comment on the incident of a passenger humiliated at the first-class gate. A flustered PR manager stammered, "We will investigate and respond later." But later was too late. The story had already spun out of control. Naomi sat unmoved, her posture upright, like a stone amid a storm. The sting she felt earlier had cooled, replaced by the familiar, icy energy that had carried her through countless dismissals. They think I am invisible. They think I am... But this time, the world will see. At the boarding gate, a passenger whispered to his friend, "This is going to explode. I saw her in a financial paper months ago. I think she's a major investor." Rumors spread like cyclones on dry straw. Then came the blow. A tweet from a verified economic journalist's account. Rumor has it the woman removed from Aurora Air's first-class seat is Naomi Carter, CEO of Grant Capital Partners. Her firm is negotiating a $2 billion bailout for Aurora. If true, this is an extinction-level crisis. The world reeled within minutes. Retweets skyrocketed. Comments flooded. Unbelievable. Aurora just dug its own grave. It's over for them. In the lounge, Naomi glanced at her phone. The tweet glowed on the screen. She did not smile, did not nod, only closed her eyes for a moment. She knew. The moment of reckoning had come. From a humiliated passenger, she had become the quiet storm threatening to sweep away an entire airline. Early morning in New York, the sky still veiled in mist. The glass tower hosting the investment conference blazed like a furnace. Inside the hall, hundreds of reporters, investors, and business leaders pressed in, waiting. Everyone knew today Aurora Air would have to answer for its survival deal, $2 billion from Grant Capital Partners. But what stirred the room even more was the rumor now raging across the internet. The woman humiliated yesterday was none other than Naomi Carter. Marcus Lee stepped into the wings, his face tense, but his eyes burning. He whispered to Naomi, "Your identity is out. The press is swarming outside. Do you want us to issue a statement first?" Naomi adjusted the collar of her cream suit, walking slowly forward. Each step of her heels echoed like a drumbeat in the hearts of those waiting. "No, I will tell them myself. They should hear it from me." The doors of the hall opened. The buzz of voices fell instantly into a heavy silence. Hundreds of eyes fixed on the woman with the steady stride, salt and pepper hair neatly pulled back, eyes unwavering. Naomi Carter entered, neither rushing nor avoiding the cameras. A CNBC reporter called out, his voice carrying across the hall. "Mrs. Carter, after yesterday's viral incident, will you still proceed with the $2 billion investment in Aurora Air?" Naomi stopped squarely on the red carpet. Her eyes swept the packed rows before landing on the Aurora Air delegation, where CEO Thomas Avery sat stiff with a forced smile. Her voice dropped low, but every word cut sharp as a blade. "I will continue working with partners who respect not only capital, but dignity. Those two cannot be separated." The room erupted. The clatter of keyboards rattled like hail. Camera flashes fired relentlessly. The phrase, "not only capital, but dignity," instantly blazed across Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Thomas Avery forced a smile, rising to extend his hand toward Naomi. "It's a shame a small misunderstanding was exaggerated. Let's focus on the future, on cooperation." Naomi tilted her head, her gaze steel. What happened yesterday was not a misunderstanding. It was the truth about how your staff decides who deserves to sit where. And that is the root problem. The hall froze. Some investors leaned toward each other, whispering. Others, their eyes lit up, as if witnessing rare leadership. Naomi stepped closer, her voice calm yet resonant. "I have frozen the first tranche, $500 million. Until I see a real commitment to change, the rest will remain untouched. Aurora Air does not just face a PR crisis. Aurora Air faces a cultural crisis. Gasps rippled through the hall. Avery paled, opening his mouth, but Marcus Lee was already on his feet, placing a thick dossier before the investors. Inside, risk reports, plunging stock figures, a flood of videos and posts from social media. The evidence was undeniable. This was no longer an isolated incident, but a crack running through the entire system. Naomi lifted her head high. Dozens of cameras captured her from every angle. I don't need Aurora to prove my power, but Aurora needs me to survive. And the price of respect has never been less than billions. Her final words struck like a hammer. A beat of absolute silence followed. Then the hall exploded, a tidal wave sweeping away every pretense of calm. In the back row, an elderly investor whispered, "This is no longer a deal. This is a lesson in history." Naomi walked out of the hall, her figure upright as a monument, leaving behind the earthquake she had unleashed. She did not need to shout, did not need to rage, only her composed silence, and the entire world trembled. Aurora Air's Los Angeles headquarters, its 38th floor gleaming with glass, had suddenly turned into a suffocating dungeon. Phones rang endlessly, while the giant screen in the boardroom showed a plunging line. The company's stock collapsing, glowing red like a gash across the ticker board. At the head of the table, Thomas Avery sat with his tie loosened, sweat streaking his temples. He slammed his hand against the polished wood. "We need to get this under control immediately. This is just a service mishap, not something to bring down the whole company." But his words drowned in the tense murmurs. The CFO lifted her head, her tone sharp. "No, Thomas, this is no longer a mishap. This is a crisis. Our stock is down 9% this morning alone. Over $1 billion in market value has vanished. Investors are pulling out. Do you still want to call this a small incident?" Silence fell. Members of the board glanced at one another, their eyes a mix of confusion and anger. In the corner, the head of PR clutched his laptop, his voice trembling. "We've drafted an apology statement. Aurora Air is committed to diversity and inclusion. We will investigate this incident. If we release it now." "Useless," another director cut in. "The hashtags are trending worldwide. Hashtag Black CEO removed. First class while black. The global press is on it. Any apology will be laughed at." An elderly board member with silver hair sighed heavily. "Worse still, the market isn't only talking about discrimination. They're talking about financial risk. Naomi Carter has frozen $500 million. If the entire $2 billion is pulled, Aurora Air won't survive the year." Whispers turned into heated arguments. Some demanded the firing of flight attendant Brooke Lawson to appease the public. Others insisted she be kept to avoid admitting fault. The more they argued, the heavier the stench of panic filled the room. Thomas Avery roared, desperate to reclaim control. "We cannot let a passenger, no matter who she is, bring down this company. I'll call Carter myself, settle it privately. A personal apology, a few perks, she'll let it go." A dry laugh cut through the room. Eleanor Briggs, chairwoman of the board, her eyes sharp as blades. "Thomas, do you really think she needs you? The whole world has just seen she can topple Aurora with a single tap on her phone. And you stand here stammering that it was a misunderstanding. You don't even know where the power lies anymore." Her words struck like a final blow. Avery froze, his face flushed purple, unable to reply. Meanwhile, in Washington, lawmakers had already taken notice. An urgent notice from the Senate Commerce Committee was issued. A hearing is requested on discriminatory practices in the airline industry. Aurora Air now faced not only the market, but the government itself. Back in Los Angeles, the boardroom sank into dead silence. Every eye carried the same grim truth. The company's fate was now clenched in Naomi Carter's hands. Outside, reporters swarmed at the base of the tower. Microphones pointed skyward, ready to seize any statement. Online, the clip of Naomi saying not only capital but dignity had surpassed 1 million shares. One journalist called it the most valuable quote of the year, worth $2 billion. In the quiet shadow of the storm, Naomi sat in her Manhattan hotel suite, her phone resting on the table, her gaze steady. She was not chasing headlines. She knew this wave would rise on its own. And when it crested, Aurora Air would lose more than money. They would lose their very soul. Naomi closed her eyes, recalling her mother's words. "They will try to erase you. All you need to do is stand still and let the world see." The world was watching, and Aurora Air was trembling. Evening in New York. In the hotel lounge, Naomi Carter sat quietly in a leather chair, the golden light casting a calm glow across her face. In front of her, her phone buzzed without pause, dozens of messages from colleagues, friends, even strangers. All of them circled around one thing. The clip from yesterday had erupted into a movement. On Twitter, the phrase, "not only capital but dignity," appeared everywhere. An Oscar-winning actress posted, "I know that look, I've seen it. Stand tall, Naomi." Her post was shared over 200,000 times in just a few hours. An NBA star walked onto the court wearing a practice shirt that read, "Dignity equals capital," greeted by a roar from the crowd. The major business papers called Naomi the icon of quiet strength. Marcus Lee entered, carrying his laptop. The glow from the screen lit his face, revealing excitement laced with worry. "Naomi, you need to see this." He pulled up a series of broadcasts. CNN ran a bold headline. "Aurora Air faces global crisis. After investment fund. CEO humiliated." NBC replayed the clip of Naomi at the boarding gate, calmly declaring, "So is respect." Financial channels showed the charts. Aurora Air's stock down another 6%, nearly $2 billion in market value, wiped out in 48 hours. Naomi watched, her expression unchanged. "Exactly as I expected. They thought they could bury the truth with a press release. But the truth has found its own audience." Marcus leaned closer. "So how do you want to respond now? A press conference? A statement?" Naomi shook her head slightly. "No, I won't shout in the middle of the storm. I'll let the storm shout their names. I will speak only when they have no choice but to be silent and listen." Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, Aurora Air's headquarters had turned into a pressure cooker. Reporters swarmed the gates. Employees whispered, many too ashamed to wear their uniforms in public. Brooke Lawson, the flight attendant at the center of it all, suddenly became the hunted name. Former passengers came forward, recounting stories of her coldness, favoritism, and disdain toward people of color. Each story poured more fuel onto the flames, already raging. In Washington, the Senate Commerce Committee formally announced hearings on discrimination in the airline industry. A senator stood before the cameras, voice stern. The incident with Naomi Carter is not an isolated case. It is a wake-up call. We will question Aurora Air and this entire industry. The news spread like lightning. Other airlines rushed out their own statements. Delta announced a new passenger equity council. American Airlines promised to review service policies. United appointed a new equity officer. Yet all of it only highlighted one reality. Aurora Air remained silent, trapped in crisis. Back at the hotel, Naomi opened her laptop and read the commentary on LinkedIn. Thousands of professionals, from professors to CEOs, were analyzing the event as a living case study. One widely shared article carried the headline, "If this is how Aurora Air treats a billion-dollar investor, imagine how they treat ordinary passengers." Naomi closed the laptop, her eyes flashing with resolve. She knew this was no longer just about personal dignity. This was a rare chance to shift an entire industry. Marcus waited, asking softly, "So what's the next step?" Naomi rose, walked to the window, and looked out at Manhattan's dazzling lights. Her voice was low but razor-sharp. "I will wait for them to come knocking, and when they do, I'll show them. The price of contempt is not measured in vouchers. It is measured in billions, and in their very future." Silence filled the room. Outside, the world roared like a tidal wave, but inside, Naomi Carter stood firm, preparing for the next strike. Los Angeles, Monday morning. The glass tower that housed Aurora Air's headquarters gleamed in the sunlight, but inside it was no sturdier than a leaking ship about to sink. In the boardroom on the 38th floor, CEO Thomas Avery leaned heavily on the table, exhaustion etched into his face. Before him was a sea of headlines. CNN replaying the clip of Naomi Carter being forced from her first-class seat. Bloomberg running a red ticker that read, "Aurora Air shares plunge 12% in pre-market trading." On Twitter, the hashtag #AuroraDiscriminates had surged straight to the global #1 spot. The head of PR stammered nervously, We released an apology statement at 6 this morning, but the reaction is overwhelmingly negative. People are mocking it, calling it a copy-paste apology." Another executive slammed his fist on the table. "The stock has lost another $800 million in a single morning. Major shareholders are calling non-stop, threatening to dump their holdings. We have to do something immediately." Thomas Avery clenched his jaw, voice sharp with strain. "I'll speak directly with Naomi. A private call, a personal apology. We can negotiate our way out." Eleanor Briggs, chair of the board, cut in coldly. "You still don't understand, Thomas. This is no longer about a first-class ticket. This is a crisis of trust. And Naomi Carter holds every key." Meanwhile, in Washington, the Senate Commerce Committee was in uproar. Senators huddled in urgent discussion. One congresswoman held high a printout of Naomi's viral tweet. "Not only capital, but dignity." Her voice rang out. This line must echo in the hearing room. Aurora Air did not just humiliate one passenger, they humiliated the trust of every citizen. The news shook the nation. Media outlets called Naomi the woman who turned a personal insult into a systemic reckoning. Back in Manhattan, inside a quiet hotel suite, Naomi Carter sat with Marcus Lee. On the screen before them was a stream of emails from Aurora Air, 3 letters of reconciliation, 2 requests for private meetings, and 1 silence agreement worth $50 million. Marcus raised an eyebrow. They think they can buy you off. Naomi gave a faint, icy smile. They're wrong. I don't want their money. I want change. She typed a few words into her phone and placed it on the table. It wasn't a reply to Aurora Air. It was a message to the press. Aurora Air offered me money to bury this scandal. I refused. Dignity is not for sale. Minutes later, the statement appeared on Twitter, spread across LinkedIn, and blazed in bold print on the Washington Post homepage. Dignity is not for sale. In the Los Angeles boardroom, the news poured gasoline on the fire. Executives pounded the table, shouting at Thomas Avery. One voice cut through the chaos. You've destroyed trust. You either resign, or the entire board will collapse with you. While Avery sat speechless, Brooke Lawson, the flight attendant who had lit the spark, was suspended immediately. But that announcement salvaged nothing. Online, people called it a scapegoat move, a sacrificial lamb to cover a systemic rot. Naomi observed everything from afar, her expression calm. She didn't need to step outside and raise her voice. The world was speaking for her. Aurora Air was tearing itself apart. That night, Naomi appeared on a major financial network. She didn't deliver a long speech, just one slow, deliberate sentence. A company can lose money and still survive. But when it loses trust and dignity, it has already signed its death warrant. At that moment, the market shuddered. Aurora Air didn't just lose billions in value. It lost its future. Morning in New York. The sky hung heavy with gray clouds, but the plaza outside the investment conference building blazed with the glare of camera lights. Dozens of reporters pressed together, microphones raised, lenses firing non-stop. A crowd surged forward, not to see Aurora Air, but to catch a glimpse of one name, Naomi Carter. The door of a sleek black car opened. Naomi stepped out, composed in a navy suit, her salt and a pepper hair tied neatly back, her eyes steady, never shying away from the cameras. In that instant, a storm of voices rose up. "Naomi! Naomi, look over here!" Flashes burst like fireworks. A CNN reporter shouted above the chaos. "Ms. Carter, do you believe this was just an accident?" Naomi stopped, turned, and looked straight into the lens. Her voice was low, clear, and deliberate. An accident is something that happens unexpectedly. This is a system, and that system has just exposed itself to the world. The crowd erupted. Phones thrust higher, cameras caught every word. In seconds, Twitter exploded with a new hashtag, #The System Exposed. As Naomi walked into the hall, in Los Angeles, Aurora Air drowned in turmoil. Executives scrambled, Phones rang like alarm bells. Furious shareholders demanded answers. Customers cancelled tickets en masse. Unions threatened strikes. Eleanor Briggs, chair of the board, slammed documents onto the table. "We are losing control. Thomas, you turned an apology into a laughing stock, and now Naomi Carter stands before the world as a symbol. What do you have left to say?" Thomas Avery opened his mouth but choked on the words. An image of him slumped at yesterday's conference was spreading online, captioned, "The man who lost $2 billion with one sentence." In the New York auditorium, Naomi sat at the center row, the eyes of hundreds fixed on her. Cameras zoomed close, capturing every flicker of her expression. The moderator asked, "Carter, why did you refuse the $50 million private settlement offered by Aurora Air?" Naomi lifted her chin, her voice firm as steel. "Because I don't need $50 million to stay silent. I want a world where silence is no longer necessary. Aurora wanted to buy forgetfulness. I want to buy change. And believe me, I can afford it." The room froze. Then applause thundered, swelling from a few rows into a crashing wave that filled the hall. In Washington, a senator watching live turned to a colleague. "She just turned a personal story into a movement. We can't look away. Draft the subpoena for Aurora Air." In Aurora's Los Angeles boardroom, the CFO's face blanched as he reported, "The stock has dropped 18% in 3 days. We've lost nearly $4 billion in market value. Creditors are starting to call." Eleanor Briggs fixed her gaze on Thomas Avery, her tone sharp as a blade. "You've turned Aurora into a global punchline. Without a solution, your seat as CEO won't last." Meanwhile, Naomi walked out of the conference hall, surrounded by reporters and supporters. A young woman stepped forward, her hand trembling as she held out an old plane ticket, her voice breaking. "I was once forced out of my business class seat just because they thought I couldn't afford it. Thank you for standing up for us." Naomi placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, her eyes softening. "I didn't stand up for you. I just opened the door. The rest we walk through together." Cameras captured the moment. Within an hour, the clip had spread across social media, given a new name, the Carter Standard. Naomi Carter was no longer a humiliated passenger. She had become a banner, a symbol for an entire generation forced to prove they belonged, and Aurora Air, from once a proud national airline, had become the textbook example of arrogance and collapse. A new question echoed everywhere. What will Naomi Carter do next? And the answer Aurora knew would not bring salvation. It would be a verdict. Washington, D.C., a crisp autumn morning, the sky blue, but the air inside the Capitol heavy as lead. The Senate Commerce Committee hearing room was packed. Reporters crowded the hallways, cameras poised and ready. This was not just a hearing about one airline. This was the moment an entire industry was being dragged into the light. The wooden doors opened. Naomi Carter walked in. A light grey suit, posture straight, eyes steady. She wore no honorary pin, had no security detail. Her calm presence alone silenced the room. Those who once dismissed her now could not look away. The committee chair struck the gavel. Today, we are here to examine discriminatory practices in the airline industry. Ms. Carter, Thank you for being here. Naomi sat down, placing an old boarding pass on the table, the slip of paper that had become a symbol. She lifted her head, her voice resonant and measured. I am not here to receive an apology. I am here to talk about risk. In finance, every investment is priced according to risk. Aurora Air asked for $2 billion, but they forgot this. Discrimination itself is a risk that can wipe out an entire company in a matter of days. The room stirred. Cameras zoomed in, recording every word. Naomi continued, her eyes locking onto the senators. Every look of contempt, every act of exclusion does more than wound an individual. It accumulates into an invisible debt, and when that debt comes due, it is paid in billions, in collapsing stock prices, in the loss of market trust. Aurora Air is living proof. An older senator frowned and asked, Ms. Carter, are you suggesting discrimination can be quantified as financial risk? Naomi nodded firmly. Yes, and last week that risk cost Aurora $4 billion in market value. This is not just about morality. This is mathematics. In the gallery, reporters scribbled furiously. An economic analyst whispered, She just reset the language of the game, from morality to finance, from emotion to numbers. In Los Angeles, inside Aurora Air's offices, Thomas Avery watched the broadcast. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Each word Naomi spoke cut deeper into the balance sheet. Eleanor Briggs, chair of the board, turned to him, her voice cold. Listen, she is no longer just a passenger. She is the judge. Back in the hearing room, Naomi closed with one powerful line. Dignity is not a privilege, it is an asset, and anyone who disregards this asset will go bankrupt. Applause thundered, even as the committee chair banged the gavel for order. Within hours, her words appeared on the front page of the New York Times. Dignity is an asset. Carter shakes Wall Street and Washington. As social media erupted, Aurora Air was further exposed. Former employees spoke out, recounting being forced to serve passengers differently based on race and status. Internal files leaked, revealing dozens of buried complaints. Aurora's stock plunged another 7% in a single day. Banks began demanding collateral. Business partners tore up contracts. Aurora was not just drowning in scandal, it was sinking outright. Naomi left the hearing room, stepping into a sea of microphones. A reporter called out, Ms. Carter, what happens next for Aurora Air? Naomi paused, her gaze unwavering. What happens next is not for me to decide. It is what they have sown for themselves. I only did one thing, shine a light on the truth. With that, she walked on, tall and unshaken in the crowd. Cameras followed her every step, capturing the image not only of a CEO, but of a symbol. Los Angeles, the 38th floor of Aurora Air's headquarters, a gloomy afternoon. The boardroom was packed, the air so heavy it felt as if everyone were trapped in a pressurized chamber about to explode. On the massive screen, bright red numbers flashed. Aurora's stock had fallen 22% in just 1 week. Analysts on CNBC called it the most dramatic freefall in the airline's history. A major shareholder slammed the table. We've lost nearly $6 billion in market value. Customers are canceling flights. Creditors are knocking at our doors. And worse, Naomi Carter is becoming a global symbol. Thomas, how much longer are you going to sit there? Thomas Avery swallowed hard, his face pale. He started to speak, but Eleanor Briggs, chair of the board, stood first, her voice cold as steel. Aurora needs a sacrifice. A face has to disappear so the public believes we are acting, and Brooke Lawson is the only choice. The room fell silent. Only the faint hum of the air conditioner filled the space. The very next day, a statement was released. Aurora Air announces termination of Chief Flight Attendant Brooke Lawson for conduct inconsistent with company values. But the effect was not what they hoped for. Instead of calming outrage, social media erupted with fury. Scapegoat. Don't blame one employee. This is systemic. Posts flooded again with Naomi standing before Congress, captioned, "Dignity is an asset." Brooke Lawson sat in her small apartment, the glow of her laptop illuminating a stricken face. Hate emails and threatening messages poured in. But what terrified her most was the silence from the company that had once shielded her. Now, Aurora treated her as dead weight, discarded like broken furniture. While Brooke sank into despair, Thomas Avery faced a real uprising. A group of shareholders held a private meeting, demanding his resignation. A leaked photo of Avery slumped with his head in his hands, spread online with the caption, "The $5 billion failure CEO." On the other side of the country, Naomi Carter rose even higher as a symbol. On LinkedIn, thousands of posts echoed her words from the Senate hearing. Dignity is not a privilege, it is an asset. Business schools began using her case as teaching material. A Harvard professor wrote, "Naomi Carter has redefined corporate risk in the 21st century." On Instagram, the image of Naomi placing her hand on the shoulder of a young woman in the hearing room became the most shared picture of the week. Captioned, "The Carter Standard, we belong everywhere." CNN invited her for a prime-time interview. The anchor asked, "Do you think you are destroying an airline?" Naomi tilted her head slightly, her voice calm and steady. "I am not destroying anything. Aurora is destroying itself. I am only a mirror, reflecting the truth they tried to hide." The answer was short, but landed like a punch. On Twitter, millions reposted, "Aurora didn't fall. They collapsed under their own weight." As Naomi was celebrated worldwide, Aurora Air slid further with no brakes. Employees began leaking internal emails, exposing a toxic culture that had festered for years. Journalists unearthed a history of buried complaints. The stock kept falling. Rival airlines seized the moment with ads declaring, "Here, every passenger belongs." In a sleepless night, Thomas Avery stared at the glowing city outside his office window. He knew the chair beneath him was crumbling, and Naomi Carter, with her silence and composure, was cornering him into a place with no escape. In Manhattan, Naomi sat in her hotel room, moonlight spilling through the window. Marcus Lee asked softly, "Do you feel satisfied now? They're collapsing on their own." Naomi answered, her voice low but unwavering. "This is not victory yet. Collapse is not enough. We must rebuild, and I will be the one to lay the first stone." Outside, the world was still in turmoil, but Naomi Carter was no longer just a figure in a scandal. She had become the symbol of a new era. Los Angeles, a grey morning. Aurora Air's headquarters loomed like a fortress under siege. Sunlight glinted off the glass facade, but inside, darkness smothered everything. On the top floor, the board meeting began, the tension so sharp it felt like a wire ready to snap. Eleanor Briggs, chair of the board, wasted no words. "Thomas, the stock has lost 30.5% in 2 weeks. Aurora has lost over $7 billion in market value. Creditors have issued warnings, and the public calls you the $2 billion man. We have no choice left." Thomas Avery shot to his feet, his voice ragged. "I've given my entire life to Aurora. One incident, one woman, and you plan to throw me out on the street." Eleanor's eyes hardened. Not one woman. Naomi Carter. And she showed the world exactly what Aurora Air disregards. You no longer have the capacity to lead. The vote was cast in silence, 11-1. Thomas Avery was removed immediately. Within minutes, the news leaked. Aurora Air CEO Thomas Avery forced to resign amid global crisis. Images of him leaving the building, coat clutched hastily in hand, face stricken, flooded live television. At the same time in New York, Naomi Carter sat quietly in her hotel room, her phone buzzing non-stop. Marcus Lee handed her a tablet showing CNN's breaking headline, "Aurora Air loses CEO. The Carter effect shakes the airline industry." Naomi exhaled softly, her gaze steady. "They think I wanted revenge, but I want more than that. Now is the time to set the terms." That afternoon, Naomi appeared at an international business conference. The entire hall rose to its feet as she stepped onto the stage. She needed no long introduction. Her name alone electrified the room. Naomi began, her voice clear, every word striking like a hammer. Aurora Air did not collapse because it lacked capital, but because it lacked dignity. That is the lesson for this entire industry. And today, I announce an initiative, the Carter Standard. The hall fell silent. Naomi continued, her eyes sweeping across rows of executives, politicians, and journalists. Every airline receiving funding from grant capital will now adhere to a new code. Transparent complaint reporting, bias training, independent oversight, and a commitment that every passenger is treated with equal respect. Those who will not comply will not receive capital. Whispers rippled, swelling into a wave. Some faces blanched, others nodded firmly. Then from the back row, a single clap rang out, spreading until the hall thundered with applause like a storm. The press exploded. Reuters declared, "Naomi Carter sets new standard for the airline industry." The Wall Street Journal wrote, "Dignity becomes a condition of investment." The hashtag #CarterStandard surged across every platform, eclipsing #AuroraCollapse. Meanwhile, Aurora Air drowned in chaos. Internal rifts widened. Hundreds of senior staff prepared to leave. But across the industry, a new path was opening. Rival airlines convened emergency meetings, many publicly vowing to adopt the Carter Standard. That evening, Naomi sat by the window, gazing out at the glowing skyline of Manhattan. Marcus asked softly, "Do you feel it's enough now?" They've lost their CEO. Billions are gone. You've won. Naomi shook her head slightly, her voice low but powerful, like an undertow. Collapse is not victory. Victory is when collapse clears the way for a more just world. Neon lights reflected across her face. Not the face of a passenger once humiliated, but the face of a leader who had transformed personal pain into a global benchmark. And from this moment, the story was no longer about the fall of Aurora Air. It had become the beginning of a new era. Naomi Carter's story was never just an incident at an airport gate. It was a mirror reflecting the arrogance of an entire system, and a reminder that dignity cannot be bought with money. It is the foundation of all value. Aurora Air collapsed. Its CEO lost his seat. Billions in stock value vanished. Yet what echoes louder than all of that is the new benchmark, the Carter Standard, that transformed a personal humiliation into an industry-wide reform. And the lesson for each of us: sometimes the greatest power is not in the loudest shout, but in the calm resolve that turns violence into a hammer strike. If you believe dignity is the most valuable asset, hit like and subscribe so you won't miss the stories to come. And leave a comment with just 3 words: I belong. Because when we affirm it together, no one will ever again be treated as an outsider.